Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular business meeting of the District of Squamish for Tuesday, June 4th. Following Squamish, Waymail. We are meeting, as always, on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. Motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Ripper. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Any no's and motions? Seeing that we don't have any delegations this evening, so we will move on to number 8, which is 8A is first 3 readings of the District of Squamish election and Assent voting bylaw. Bylaw number 2675, 2019. Over to you, Ms. Pollock.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. My name is Charlene Pollock. I'm the Manager of Legislative Services. And I'm here today to talk about the amendment to the election bylaw. So just a little bit of background. Election bylaw number 2420 was adopted by Council in November 2017 to incorporate changes in legislation and also to include allowing mail ballot voting. And the previous bylaw to that one had been adopted in 1993, so it was quite a large number of changes. I've handed out a corrected bylaw. There's a section that I have removed from what was included in the agenda. That is section 5.1, and that section speaks to advanced voting opportunities, and the Local Government Act requires that we hold 2 advanced voting opportunities that are included in the bylaw. And I realized after drafting the bylaw that the legislation requires the timing to be 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So that needs to stay in the bylaw. The change was going to be at the discretion of the Chief Election Officer. So that is what the change is. And then I'll just speak briefly to the proposed amendments. So there's two amendments to the section 9.2, and that's the mail ballot voting application. So the wording has been amended to take out the reference to timing for receipt of applications. So we found that was just too restrictive, especially for people going away that were planning on being away for several months. So that's the timing has been removed. So we can receive an application from a voter at any time before. And then section 9.2 was also amended to allow mail ballot packages to be available on the day following receipt of the ballots. So the current wording in the bylaw says that they're available on the first day of advance voting. So that may not be a huge difference, but when the timeline is already very tight, and it just will allow a few more days to get packages mailed out and then receive them back by mail. And then there is an amendment in section 10.6, and that's the recount procedure. So the wording currently is vague, and it doesn't include, it just says if a candidate requests a recount, the Chief Election Officer will conduct the recount. So we've added in wording that a recount will be conducted if there is a difference of 10 votes or less for the position of mayor or the 7th place councillor position. And the voting machines are very accurate, as we discovered in the last election when we did a recount. It came out exactly the same. So we have a lot of confidence in the voting machines. And then the last amendment is also to that section 10.6B, and that just includes wording that the same vote counting units would be used, that were used for general voting day, advance, and special in the event of a recount. And that is it. I've got the recommendation on the screen and happy to answer questions.
Councilor Baker?
The one I had is should we be putting some sort of restriction, so, you know, at most 2 months or at the start of the election period is when you can start requesting a mail-in ballot, or, you know, could someone request one a year ahead?
I think if someone, through the mayor, if someone requested one that far in advance, we would probably ask them to, I don't know that we need wording in the bylaw to state that, but I do think it's better not to have a defined timeline.
Any other questions? Councilor Reyes?
Yeah, I guess my thought on that would be we have to establish who the candidates were, so you really couldn't do it before the nomination period closed. Pretty difficult. But unless people were just pulling names out of a hat. But the other thing that just occurred to me when you were talking is if there was a by-election where you're not electing 6, but you're only electing 1, and it would be between first and second, can we just expand the wording to include that? And I don't want to suggest wording to you, I'll let you do that, but
Through the mayor, yes, we can add that wording in. So the motion would be amended to include that wording.
yeah, to include recounts on by-elections. Sorry, I didn't think of that until just now.
Any other questions? Determining that a vote of 10 votes, that a recount would happen if there's a difference of 10 votes or less. Is that a number that we've come up with, or is that pretty standard across other municipalities or provincial jurisdiction? I know West Van had their votes were about 22 when they did a recount.
That's a number that we came up with.
And we did debate, Robin Arthur's General Manager, Corporate Services, we did debate between the two of us whether it should be 5 or 10. I mean, we're very confident with the machines, very confident. And we decided, okay, we'll go with 10. It's arbitrary and it's different all over the province. It's usually at the discretion of the chief election officer entirely without putting in a number. But we decided that we would, you know, define it. It hasn't, there's been greater gap usually than just 2 votes.
Any other questions? Councilor Britt?
Yeah, the only thing that really, well, 2 things jumped to me. I'm happy to see sort of the relaxation around the mail-in ballots. I did hear some feedback post-election about how that was a bit hard for some people to work with, so I'm happy to see that change. And that 10 number jumped at me. I witnessed the recount, I think we all, you know, remember that, and it was perfectly replicated all the way through. I just wonder about any challenges to that. If it's 11, if someone's off by 11 votes and they want to do a recount, is it going to have more drawn out procedure than just, even though a recount is a drawn out procedure in its own right, or how would that work?
Okay, if I might, so at the request to the chief election officer is somewhat discretionary. Any candidate can challenge for a recount to a judge, to the court, and there's a process in the legislation for that. So if it's 11 and you want to recount, you can go to the court.
That same process exists. If it was an 11 without this amendment to the bylaw, if it was an 11 difference, and the candidate wanted to challenge it, and the chief electoral officer said not interested, then the same mechanism exists. So it's not really restricting that.
Okay, seeing no more questions, so we'll move the motion with the amendment suggested by Councilor Reyes. Moved by Councilor Hepburn, seconded by Councilor Reyes. Any other comments?
I'll just say a quick thanks to staff for the iterative process in terms of updating the bylaw. I think I definitely heard some feedback, especially with the mail-in ballot, so I was excited to see this come forward and changes be made, so thanks for being here.
I just spoke to my support of the mail-in and having witnessed the recount that we had this time, I'm amazed at how not only did that 2-vote gap stay the same, but all the other neighbors were the same as well. So it was amazingly accurate and gives me a lot of confidence in our electoral process. Thank you for your hard work.
I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Next up is the adoption of the District of Squamish Floodplain Management Bylaw number 2676, 2019. Moved by Councilor Reyes, seconded by Councilor French. Any comments? Councilor Anderson?
I note that district staff have been interested for some time in acknowledging Squamish nature, culture, heritage, and language in place names, for example, new developments. In this report, I refer to Schedule B, location map. There is a place name that used to be the Cowtain Slough. In fact, on old flood protection maps, and we've started to call it the Harris Slough. And I just raised this because it is an excellent opportunity to do exactly what we are all discussing and aspire to, is acknowledge Squamish Nation. It should probably revert in district planning documents back to the Cowtain Slough, because that's where it's located, right adjacent and in the midst of the Cowtain Reserve. That's Schedule B, page 41 and 142 in my package. In fact, Harris is spelled wrong. The settler that lived there was spelled H-E-R-R-E-S, excuse me, and he lived there for a very short time. That's where that reference comes from, but we, in any maps up into the 60s, called it the Cowtain Slough. And I just draw the attention, perhaps this issue might be referred to engineering and planning, because I can assure that the residents of the Cowtain community still call it the Cowtain Slough.
We will make that correction.
Thank you. Did someone move and second it? Yes. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, corporate services, staff reports. We have committee of the whole terms of reference and off Tuesday hearing policy. I suggest to formalize our committee of the whole process and also formalize when we will hold public hearings on the off Tuesdays rather than first and third Tuesdays. Over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott. Robin Arthurs, General Manager of Corporate Services. I did have a presentation, but for some reason it's not showing up on my thumb drive, so I don't know what I did. Saved it somewhere. So this comes forward to Council subsequent to presentation and discussion at the March 26th Committee of the Whole. The suggestions that were made at that meeting were incorporated into the two items before you today, one of which is terms of reference for a Committee of the Whole meeting. There was some bullets added in around some of the purposes of the Committee of the Whole, and as well as some clarification under 5B on the terms of reference. For the public hearing off Tuesday hearing policy, there was a couple of items that were incorporated into it. Essentially, it's the same. And the purpose of an off Tuesday policy is to establish for council and staff some of the situations that might necessitate moving hearings off-site outside of council chamber because there's too many people expected that we can accommodate, or there's too many items planned that require public submission to council like a DVP, development variance permit, for example, or a public hearing. And we might want to hold that meeting not on a regular meeting, Tuesday, the first or third Tuesday of the month, but the second or fourth. And as well, we might need a different venue. Both of these documents are fairly straightforward, and I know that Mayor Elliott had some comments for discussion as well, with the terms of reference.
Yep, but I will open it up to my fellow councillors, see if there's any questions at this point. How's it go?
Well, there's a typo.
Okay.
And there's some questions. So on page 53, it says, hold meetings to consider and discuss matters pertaining to community risk and safety, add resulting policy. I think it's meant to be and resulting policy.
Whereabouts on page 50? In the report?
In the actual policy.
Oh, it's page 56 in my agenda.
Oh, okay, 56.
And it's the third to last bullet under number 1.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Got that.
And if I may, in terms of questions, should we have a specific provision or set some expectations around public participation at committee of the whole meetings?
That came up during the discussion on March 26th, and it was sort of left to the chair at whether topic-based to invite the public to join the table or not.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead, Councillor.
So that then, I guess, with that, and then some of the, deciding whether or not something fits an off Tuesday or regular meeting, those kinds of decisions, is it worth saying explicitly that those decisions are at the discretion of the mayor or acting mayor? Or is that just understood?
For the off Tuesday meetings, staff would bring forward a recommendation or a request. Public hearings are set at the time, typically, that second reading is given, so it would be a debate in the motion at the regular council meeting as to whether or not to accept staff's recommendation or not. Once in a blue moon, we'll all of a sudden receive an influx of submissions where we know that there's going to be a lot of people showing up, and we will approach the mayor as staff and say, we really think that we should move this to the 55 or to Brennan Park, and the mayor's got that authority to change the date.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I wonder if that's worth stating explicitly. And in terms of public participation, that it's at the discretion of the mayor. If it's worth just explicitly putting that in the policy.
In the public hearing one, the off Tuesday one? Or the committee of the whole?
The committee of the whole one.
I certainly want other councillors to weigh in on that. My thoughts have always been it's been at the discretion of the chair of the meeting. But staff would be open to hearing feedback from other council members on that item, whether you think we should formalize in the committee of the whole policy that public participation is at the discretion of the chair. Councillor Bird?
I'm not opposed to explicitly putting that language in so the public knows that what the process is and how they can engage with the council, even though that's just stating how we've already been doing. But I think putting that in there gives the public an idea of how they should go about if they would like to speak and who they should talk to, and that it can be done. What's the problem?
Councillor Rees?
Yeah, I with respect, disagree. I think it's better just to leave it at the call of the chair, because there's a variety of different circumstances, and sometimes, for example, we're in planning or potential rezoning or something like that, where there is a legislative process, and so some cases you don't want the public talking to something earlier in the public hearing, for example, because it can get out of hand that way. We've had issues like that before. So I'd be inclined to, pretty hard to have one rule or craft all, or cover all the different scenarios that can arise. Plus some members of the public may be a bit of a nuisance actually, and that can cause problems with the meeting. And a chair has to be able to control the meeting, and so I would leave it at the call of the chair. And the chair would be either the mayor or the acting mayor or second acting mayor, depending on the circumstances.
So just for clarity, Councillor Race, do you want the policy to be silent on this?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just felt there was a disconnect. I wasn't saying that a member of the public could just add themselves to the speaking list or anything. I was just wanting to explicitly say that it is at the call of the chair. So whether that makes a difference in Councilor Race's position or not.
Some position.
Anybody else want to comment on that topic? But whether to enshrine it or leave the policy silent? Councillor Stoner?
I'd be happy to make it explicit in the policy. I think it's important to reflect that the public can participate in certain components of the committee of the whole. It is a different structure than the regular business meeting. And so I think making that explicit that there's room for public participation and call the chair is useful.
Councillor Anderson?
In my experience as an observer during committee of the whole meetings, I really felt it was quite a privilege to be able to speak at the table. It was something, in my recollection, that was introduced during the last council term, and I would recommend that it remain as a silent policy. And I trust that the chair or the acting chair can exercise good discretion. Perhaps there may be anybody can approach prior to the meeting and inquire. But I think that often there were cases where meetings were pressed for time. And in the interest of time management, for one thing, but I'm not seeing a need to articulate a policy on this. I think that what has worked thus far it is not broken. That's fine, as is.
I've got 2 silence, 3 enshrine. Councillor Rich?
I support the current wording, so agreeing with Councillors Race and Anderson on this.
I too am fine with it being silent, so we'll leave that for now. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Peggo?
It seems like we are contemplating electronic participation, formalizing that for regular and I believe special meetings. I didn't see anything but committee of the whole, and so I was curious about our intention or expectation for committee of the whole.
I'll let you answer that one, Ms. Arthurs.
We're bringing forward on the 25th. Do you remember the date? Maybe July? For the electronic participation, the procedure bylaw amendment.
Okay, that's,
It's coming, yeah, it is coming, but it is up for council discussion and direction. Right now, currently, it is for special meetings and to make quorum and no
The
more
next
than...
item on the agenda.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, okay, there you go. It's the next meeting, it's the next item on the agenda, so what, can we wait until it gets there?
Well, just because we're on the committee of the whole policy, I'm wondering if we should be discussing this.
Well, we would address
This is
electronic
just in terms of
participation
reference.
in the
Yeah.
electronic
Oh, okay.
participation
In the
policy.
procedure
Fair
bylaw,
enough.
sorry. I'm having a nap.
Ms. Pollock?
and it is, electronic participation is included for special and council committees, so it is permitted for committee of the whole.
Councillor Peggo?
So one other question I had, given that we cannot ratify decisions at a committee of the whole, how important is quorum for a committee of the whole?
Essential.
It's essential. Committee of the whole. You can't have a committee of the whole without a quorum. That's my understanding. Ms. Arthurs?
And one of the other things about that, the committee of the whole, is if there's an item that's extremely lengthy and important and pertinent and it's, 2-hour presentation and dialogue with staff, and it's a committee of the whole, and somebody's missing, when the motions or the recommendations come forward to council, sometimes on those items, you end up having a whole another hour discussion for the benefit of the person who is missing, or to answer questions and get debate because they haven't had time to maybe watch the meeting in the archives. So I just put that forward for council's thought.
Any other? One of the things I found a little bit confusing for clarity is in the purpose statement, one of the bullets says, any other items to be, okay, never mind, that's clarified in 5.2. So the other one was the biannual receipt of development application status matrix. So this is a list of the developments. And I couldn't remember, council, whether at March 26th we discussed whether that would be twice a year or quarterly. And this policy says that we would receive that sort of update on development applications that are active or have come on stream twice a year. So
Well, I wasn't here at that particular meeting, so I don't know, but I would encourage it to be coming forward quarterly. One time we did it when we had a planning committee, we brought it forward monthly, but I think that proved to be just a little onerous. From my understanding, and staff can correct me, it's a relatively simple thing to produce these things. It's more or less a list that's in data anyway, so it's just a matter of printing it out. I inquired about that some years ago when we started doing it, so I don't think it's onerous to have it. But for me, an update quarterly is, particularly with a fast-moving community, would be more appropriate as opposed to sending out.
Councilor Pingill?
I don't, to be honest, recall that discussion. I remember watching the discussion with the previous council. For me personally, it strikes me as something that I would almost expect in a consent agenda that would make it quarterly and then pull things that comes up to talk to.
Councilor Anderson?
I'm in favor of quarterly reports as well, whether or not we implement something like a community development committee in future as existed in the past. One reason is that we are approached by members of the public regarding individual developments at certain various stages in their application process all the time. And these are opportunities to ask quick questions of the planning department. And I agree that we have a fast-paced development scene in Squamish, so quarterly is appropriate, I feel.
I'm generally seeing consensus around making that change to quarterly, Ms. Harpers. And then in 5.2, we talk about the acting mayor, or in their absence, the next month's acting mayor will chair the committee of the whole meetings. So as we've been the last few months working with this new structure, the acting mayor comes to agenda planning with the mayor. And so the acting mayor and the mayor know what's on the agenda and whether items are for decision or for discussion or the outcome staff are looking for from each agenda item. So if we change it to the acting mayor, that person will then need to be fully briefed on that agenda because they haven't attended any of the agenda planning meetings. Or we could just put it back to the mayor, chairs. I'm hoping that when you're all acting mayor, you're not planning vacation. So you'll be here, except for maybe like extenuating circumstances, illness, or an emergency. So anyway, this one thing I just wanted to test with folks about whether you wanted it to go to the acting mayor or back to the mayor to chair if the acting mayor, last lot of actings, is unable to chair. What's on first?
Well, when I read that, I was trying to think of the situation where the mayor and the acting mayor are elsewhere or tied up. I wasn't thinking that, that the acting, the mayor would be present, the acting mayor would be absent, and the acting was, and that wasn't what I was thinking. I was thinking that the first two were somehow
both absent.
Way on some importance, some variety. That's where that came into play. So I would have to read again to see that that's not what it articulated, that's what I read when I read it, in which case.
Ms. Arthurs, which scenario were we contemplating with 5.2?
What are we doing there?
When I wrote this, I was thinking if the acting mayor is away and the mayor's still there, it would be the acting. So, but I hear what you're saying, but I didn't think about that. Because I think the procedure bylaw, or we've always in practice sort of, if both the mayor and the acting mayor are away, it goes to acting. Or a council has the ability to vote and elect a chair.
Any thoughts now that you have that?
Well, yeah, I think if the acting mayor's away, the mayor should do it. Mayor's that seems to be more potentially more productive, which is the one having these meetings.
Council Race?
And I tend to agree with that. I think when we went to that second acting mayor position, part of it was to accommodate the month of August when everybody seemed to leave town.
Disappear.
So, and I was sometimes left alone. But, so I think it makes more sense. But the other thing, just when you mentioned that, and having just gone through it last month, bringing the acting mayor to the agenda planning sessions works, except for the last one. Because then you've got the acting mayor for the month of May planning the agenda for the month of June, and that person isn't going to be the acting mayor. So you might consider
We gotta
bringing
fix
the
that
acting mayor
glitch in
into
the
them
system.
1 week earlier.
Yeah.
So, but that's not part
Noted.
of this stuff.
Yeah. Council Bagnell?
My inclination would be if the acting mayor's away and the mayor isn't, that just mayor's discretion, what makes the most sense. Probably just the mayor doing it. But also with the agenda planner, I think we all have, or should have some sense of what is coming up. And so I don't think we'd be completely in the dark even before that agenda planning meeting.
So you're sitting on the fence?
No, I would go with discretion of the mayor. Acting mayor, so.
That's right on the fence.
Oh. One fence then.
Councillor Stoner?
The acting mayor is away, I'm supportive of it defaulting back to the mayor.
Okay. All right, I think that's simplest. And then we go back to our old rule of some reason or both away, it goes to the acting. We're silent on who plans the agenda. Is that incorporated just behind the scenes and how we do things, or? All right. It does say the last bullet under purposes, any other items determined to be appropriate by the chair and the mayor. I think that was all my questions on that one. Any other? Oh, there might have been one more.
Yeah.
This idea of a go, no-go discussion. So this is in 5A, the second Tuesday of the month, for the purpose of receiving planning-focused items, including but not limited to planning policy, development application, go, no-go discussions. There's no information around that. Like there's certain criteria that developments have to meet. It's not just any development can come forward to committee of the whole to get a go, no-go decision. We don't want to do planning by a committee of the whole. So I'm actually would prefer to take that language out, unless you have a suggestion for better language. I mean, I know we'll do it, but there's a whole bunch of criteria around who would come. Ms. Arthurs.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, but did we not put into the development procedure bylaws when prior to first reading, large developments with certain criteria would come first to committee of the whole? Or did we take that out?
There may be a threshold below which it wouldn't come. It needed to reach that threshold. There may be. I have to check.
I can take it out for now, and then if it turns out that we need to define it, which we probably don't, because there is some discretion about what comes to the committee of the whole. We could always put it back in if we need to, but we probably could.
Councillor Reyes?
Yeah, and I can't frankly remember what went in the procedure bylaw, but in discussions, we've talked about large developments, developments with particular impacts, and also developments which raise policy issues, being the criteria that would bring these things forward.
I just wanted to take ask about a previous comment, and just so I understand, make sure I'm understanding the parameters around an agenda planning meeting. I mean, it's been my expectation that essentially the mayor is proposing the agendas. There's inclusion when you're acting mayor to sort of think about the order and discuss that, but it's still ultimately the mayor essentially determining the key items that get proposed to council. And whether you're acting mayor or not, as councillors, you know, we bring up with you as the mayor if we have a particular item we want to discuss, or falling back proceed with a notice of motion. I'm not seeing that when you're acting mayor, the agenda planning is sort of the appropriate place to put your personal items on the agenda.
So,
And I'm more just sort of asking for, you know, thoughts on that.
I mean, in practice, generally, council just come to the mayor and say, I'd like to see this on the agenda, why can we get it on the agenda? And then I figure out a way to make that happen. Which is an effort to avoid the notice of motion, which is generally sudden and difficult to manage. And usually happens because people are being stonewalled by someone to get on the agenda. I don't think that's what's done. But also people can use it in emergency situations too. If it needs to be addressed, then we've missed the planning window.
So I guess maybe a way to rephrase what I'm thinking is my thought is that my role as a councillor and the things I'd like to see on the agenda as a councillor, that's sort of quite separate from my role as acting mayor. And as acting mayor, when I'm on agenda planning, I'm supposed to be looking at the big picture and not focusing on what particular issues I may have feelings about as a councillor.
Correct. It's not your personal agenda month. You're trying to take that broader view of the community and work with the mayor to set the agenda and make sure it flows. And I also see it as a learning opportunity to be part of those agenda planning meetings and see what goes into it, so that that's not invisible to councillors. We weren't part of those last term, and so it's important to me that all of you see what goes into the agenda when you're acting mayor. Councillor Reyes.
I was just going to make that point. Actually, this is the first term, in my experience, where the mayor has invited acting mayors to the agenda planning meetings. And from my perspective, it was the mayor going out of the way to be inclusive. And also occasionally, you know, another voice at the table on some issues helps. But just sort of another set of eyes on something. But it's not mandated anywhere.
All right, so Ms. Arthurs, do you have the feedback that because we're giving it 3 readings, so should we give it 2 and bring
It's
it back?
just a policy. This is not a bylaw.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just a terms of reference. It's not even a policy. It's really fluid, this one. The policy is for the off Tuesday meetings.
Right, so for this one on committee of the whole, we're going to change, we'll correct the typo. We're going to look at the go, no-go language. We'll clarify that in the absence of the acting mayor, the mayor will be the chair.
And quarterly.
And quarterly instead of biannual receipt of development application status. Is that good, council? We can always bring this back if it's not working. All right, so do we need a motion to
There is a recommended motion that the District of Squamish approve the Committee of the Whole terms of reference as amended. And then that the District of Squamish approve the off Tuesday hearing policies presented June 4th.
Okay, we'll do those separately. So can someone move the committee of the whole terms of reference as amended? Moved by Council Ray, seconded by Council Stoner. Any further comments? All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. And that the District of Squamish approve the off Tuesday hearing policy as presented this evening. Moved by Councilor Stoner, seconded by Councilor Anderson. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Now we're going to talk about the electronic participation at council meetings policy. It's okay, it took us all a while to realize it was the next agenda item. Well, sounded familiar to us. Shall we take minutes for you, Ms. Paul?
I was just going to ask this. Good evening, my name is Charlene Pollack. I'm the Manager of Legislative Services, and I'm here to talk about the electronic participation policy that has been drafted. And I did hand out the report that went to council. The wrong version was included in the agenda package because it was originally going to go to committee of the whole. So the report that's been handed out essentially has all the same information. It's just corrected with
The
dates.
time references are different, yeah.
That's right. Okay, so electronic participation by members of council is outlined in the procedure bylaw and also in the community charter. And electronic participation is permitted at special council meetings and council committee meetings, not regular meetings. And the community charter permits just for special and council committee meetings, so I don't know that it's likely not possible to allow at regular council meetings. And the purpose of the policy is to set out procedures for members when they're participating electronically. And also, the policy includes a statement for the chair to read out, just to make clear the rules for the member participating electronically. So during council orientation, it was requested that staff draft a policy, and so that is what we have in front of you.
All right, council, any questions about this one? Councilor Pettengill and Councilor Stoner?
So, just with the, I feel, and I don't want to tempt fate, but that you've got a pretty collaborative group. That might not always be the case. So I was just wondering if it made sense to state that the technology used for the participation is at the discretion of staff, and council as a whole might dictate that. But not sure we want to open the door for a particular council to demand a specific technology solution for them to be able to participate. So just making that clear. And then going along with that, making sure there's some training, installation, whatever's available beforehand. And then I just struggled a little bit with the piece around meeting shall be recessed if a technical difficulty occurs on the district side. Sometimes it's not so easy to figure out where the problem is. So I'm just, I had some idea of something like, up to 2 10-minute recesses to try and get things working, but that's as far as we go. And at the start of the meeting, maybe you ask the people calling it beforehand, and they can weigh that and say, hey, if you have trouble, just don't bother, and just so we can, not be fighting technology so much.
Through the chair, certainly we can add wording with some timing for the recess.
Council generally in support of that, with a nod of the head. That we would recess to help the person who's on the other end of the line as well. Okay. Any other comments on this policy? Councilor Race?
Well, my experience with it was at the regional district where it was instituted last term, and so we've had numerous meetings where somebody has participated electronically, especially with some of the distances involved with the regional district for some instances. And it works quite well. It has one advantage of giving you quorum at times when you might not have quorum to allow a meeting, especially a special meeting, called on short notice and irregular schedule. If you have something you have to do and you have to have quorum, it allows that to happen. The key thing is the chair, whoever's chairing the meeting has to be there in person. But apart from that, it can go actually quite well. And as long as the person that is phoning in understands the protocol, and in my experience, the meeting hasn't really been delayed more than a minute or two if somebody loses connection, because there is typically a protocol. So if I'm phoning in and I lose connection, I just text the CAO or whoever the key staff person is and try to establish contact. But these things have actually, in my experience, worked quite well at the regional district level, so I expect they will do as well.
Councillor Stoner?
Just a question on point 3 in the policy where there's only one member of council participating electronically. He or she will be called on speakerphone immediately. Just wondering if we need to specify who calls who. In some instances, it might be easier for the person participating to call in. Is that possible?
That's what happens typically. Is sometimes we've had council members who are out of the country and it's easier for them to call in. Other times they might be at home or they might be on their cell phone at another meeting and we'll phone them. Whatever the arrangements are.
I just read that as if it was required that the speakerphone call the participant.
It does sound like that.
The purpose was just if it's one person, then they can call in. I think it's not, I can change the wording.
We can make it a little more flexible. Because I know when I was overseas, it was easier to use Skype and call in that way rather than you guys trying to call. Councillor.
Thank you. We've had a few instances of, actually, I think there was, well, the mayor was away. I think Councillor French participated electronically one time, and I thought it went quite well and added to the meeting. So I was curious about point 7, where it states a maximum number of meetings that can be attended that way. And admittedly, it seems generous, but I'm curious why, if it's participation in a meeting and it's allowed to meet quorum, then why would we be limiting the number of occurrences of that? And if you could speak to if there's any.
So that wording is included in the procedure bylaw, and if council wants to change that and increase the number, then it would require an amendment to the procedure bylaw.
Oh, so it's in both.
We'd have to amend a bylaw rather than just a policy.
Okay. I don't think it's overly restrictive or anything. It seems very generous, but I was curious where that came from. So it's. Thank you.
All right. I don't see any further questions. So, motion to approve the electronic participation at council meetings as amended. Moved by Councilor Stoner, seconded by Councilor First. Any other comments? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We're now on to the council maternity and parental leave policy. Again, this is policy, no bylaws. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. So, third report is council maternity and parental leave policy. And so I'll just speak to eligibility in the policy. So elected officials who have a baby or adopt a child are eligible for maternity and or parental leave in the proposed policy. As well, elected officials who are spouses of persons giving birth or adopting a child are eligible for parental leave benefits under the policy. And maternity leave and parental leave is up to a maximum of 6 months, and they cannot be combined. There is wording in the policy that elected officials may request an extension, and a council motion would be required in that instance. And members are entitled to full remuneration and benefits during the leave, and the District of Squamish would cover the cost of the benefits. And there's a provision in the policy that 4 weeks notice be provided to the corporate officer or the mayor where possible. And also includes wording that members will maintain and resume all appointments and designations upon return, and may attend any council or committee meetings, and can continue to participate as an active member of council at any time. So that is up to them.
Questions? How's the ring?
It's partly a question, partly a comment. Could you go back to the first slide, please? No, sorry, the next one. That one. So I had two things to talk about. One is that I just noticed. So when you are adopting, it's only the spouse of the person adopting the child. So with adoption, it could be either parent or both parents, because the child could be new to a relationship. It could be with one, and the second person comes into the second adult comes into the relationship. So, so we might want to just broaden that out. But on adoption generally, this came out of the committee of the whole last week, of course, when I was chairing the meeting, and of course didn't think about adoption. When I was sitting there discussing this, I was kind of thinking about the babe in a blanket getting handed, now you're the adopted parents. But of course, as I thought about it later, adoption can happen up to, but not including age 19. So you could have an adoption of 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 3/4-year-old sort of thing. And was that the intent of the policy? And so there's two types of adoption. I used to do this work, and so there's where two parents adopt a child that's new to the relationship, which might be fairly recently born, or could be almost any age, but certainly could be a sort of elementary school age or something like that. Those are not uncommon. The other type of adoption that's referred to as a step-parent adoption, in the slang term, is where an adult marries into a relationship where the other person already has a child or children, and for some reason the other natural parent of those children might have predeceased or somehow out of the picture, abandoned the relationship or whatever, and the new parent coming in, the new spouse coming in, would adopt those children. And as adoptions go, that's actually a fairly common scenario. And so it doesn't necessarily happen on the wedding day. Typically there's a process involved still with the ministry. And so it might happen a year or two later that all of a sudden the adoption is there. This new person coming into the relationship is now an adopted parent. And it happened 2 years after marriage, and the child is, say, 13 years old. Can we now trigger the leave? Is that the intent of the bylaw? Speaking for myself, it wasn't my intent. I was thinking more when there's a more vulnerability, either a very young child, as it would be with a natural birth, typically in the first year, or there might be other issues that complicate the adjustment of the child to the relationship. Generally speaking, I wasn't thinking about the possibility of an adult all of a sudden, not an adult, an older child all of a sudden triggering a leave like this.
So I think that that could be easily remedied. What this is, the intent of this is to mirror what qualifications that employees get. So employees would not qualify for parental leave under EI for adopting a stepchild that's already there. It wouldn't qualify. The intent of this policy is to mirror what employees would be entitled to under all of the different legislations for a maternity or parental leave. So that, and that is not one of them. So we could add that kind of language in to make it clear that under purpose, that this policy is intended to provide council members the same leave provisions, for lack of a better term right now, as employees would be entitled to under BC and Canada legislation.
And when Ms. Falk and I were talking about this, I wasn't aware that there were some restrictions. Does the EI policy, for example, have restrictions on that?
Absolutely. If you were to get married and adopt an 8-year-old, you couldn't request parental leave from EI for that situation, I don't believe. I think it has to be. You've got
It is silent. There is no, there's no reference to age of adoption.
But there is reasons for, on the application, on your application.
Yeah, Ms. Arthurs is correct that EI does not, you don't qualify for EI if you're doing a stepchild adoption. The child already exists in a family home, and joining that home, EI doesn't qualify.
So it only, so it would only then be a problem if you had 2 adults adopting a new child to the relationship, and that child was, well, it's not a problem necessarily, 17, 18 years old perhaps, for a new child or something like that. Then you might get it, and then of course it might be necessary. That's my concern.
Councilor Pena?
So part of my job is thinking of edge cases and avoiding them. So along council races, if someone wants to adopt multiple children, like a new child every 6 months, is that sort of thing, maybe it's just too much of an edge case, but, because in software, this kills your software, it needs to be the program it has to. So is that something that the policy is able to handle, or, I would presume our intent is not to provide a sort of unlimited chain of leaves.
Ms. Pollock?
Mayor Elliott, this is a policy, so I think if a situation arose, council still has the ability to consider a motion and making a change.
Yep.
So 2 other things I thought of. We've left it, I'm supportive of what we're talking about, but we've left it still at the general discretion of council if someone has a serious unexpected illness or accident. And I was just, in my mind, tossing around whether or not it made sense to put in the policy the same level of consideration, or do we feel that this is a particularly unique situation that we want to handle specially?
The reason I asked staff to bring it forward is that we are the only level of government that doesn't have maternity and parental leave rights. And we are a very young demographic in Squamish, and I don't want people to opt out of running for public office simply because they feel that they can't fulfill their dreams of having a family. I don't think they should give that up in order to run for public office. So I think across the province, you have examples of where councils have given people leave due to serious illness. But this is a situation where there's quite a lot of debate at UBCM about whether this should happen, and whether you should plan to not have children during the year. And there were a lot of us that felt quite differently about it, that this is a special case. So I think some people recognize if you're in a car accident, you need time to recover, you get the leave of counsel. But for something that maybe some people hold the idea that you should be able to plan for and around, I think this is a special case that we need to address and give people the right to take leave. But that's really my the reason I brought it forward. I don't know if staff have a different opinion about how this differs from illness or injury.
There is wording in the community charter that disqualification does not apply if the absence is due to illness or injury or is with the leave of counsel. So it does cover illness or injury in the legislation.
This isn't covered. So we're trying to enshrine it with a little more formality. How's that good?
Thank you. I like this policy as a whole, and I appreciate how it's contemplating a bunch of different scenarios. One thing that jumped at me here was the elected officials who are spouses of persons giving birth to adoption. There's all sorts of family configurations and people having children, and I just wondered if that was if spouse was the most appropriate word there, not partner or I don't know.
Yeah, in my experience, that word would include either formally married or a common law, and common law is generally recognized as two people living together as man and wife, or man and man, husband. It's not something that happens overnight unless you actually formally marry. That is the word.
Does staff have a response? Or CEO? The acting CEO? The actual CEO?
I'm acting like a CEO. Still on hold. One word I can suggest is co-parent.
Hey, why don't we cover all our bases for a spouse, or a common law partner, or a co-parent? We'll leave it open. There's lots of configurations.
I don't know if there's any one thing that captures what I'm thinking of.
In item 4, so this statement is important to me, is that elected officials maintain their appointments and designations. I thought we should maybe clarify this. So it's one thing for your own council to say you've got the leave of this council. And you can come and go, if you want to come to council meeting, great. If you don't for the next 6 months. I'm not sure that's fair to committees we appoint people to or to the SORD, that person sitting on the SORD. So it says an elected official on maternity or parental leave will maintain and resume all appointments and designations upon their return from leave. I think we should add that because I think we should actually replace them. So if the member of council is actually the SORD representative, we should actually appoint a temporary replacement so that we don't leave the SORD without its full voting members. So I just wanted to add that bit of clarifying language there. And then let's do your hand, Councilor. There you go. And in the purpose, I thought we could just clean up the language a little bit. That first sentence was quite long. And just in an effort to encourage individuals who are interested in becoming a public elected official and who may wish to give birth or adopt a child during the term of office, eliminate the rest, and then put the district of Squamish has created a family-friendly policy. So that sentence around during or to run for municipal council, I think is redundant. Confuses the sentence. Councilor Pattengill, and did I see your hand again, Ms. Councilor?
No.
No. Okay.
So I think in the spirit of this, I think it sounds like there's support for this, but hand in hand with this in my mind should be 2020 budget, a line item that would cover 1 6-month leave and carry it forward, or maybe a mini reserve and start funding it so that when someone needs this, it's not like, oh, what services programs do we have to cut to make this work, and so we're ready to.
I don't think that's an issue, but I'll let staff respond.
Through Mayor Elliott, really there are no budget implications because the member of council would not be replaced. There would be the cost of the benefits.
But we already budget for those because we budget for a contingent of 700. I think we're good. Any other comments? So motion that council approve the council maternity and parental leave policy as amended by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any further comments? Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, I'll just speak this when I wasn't here when this came to committee of the whole. But, I was really excited to see that this was on the agenda and went back and listened to the discussion about it. I think this is really important to bring forward so that folks do feel like they're able to both pursue public office and pursue their family lives as well. I think that it's very progressive, but there are very few municipalities that have done this, and so I'm excited to see that Squamish is taking the lead on.
Thank you. I concur. Thank my colleagues for putting their minds to this policy. It's important to me, and I do think, Whistler has had this policy in place for quite some time. They're one of the first in BC, and hopefully the motion at UBCM, which did pass a number of years ago, finally gets the province's attention, and then we wouldn't have to do this locally. It would just be granted to us provincially. So, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you for that work. Next up, from Community Planning and Infrastructure is the Public Gathering Space Utilization Update. Mr. Robinson. I want to give you a nickname, like One Arm.
Single-handedly. Okay, that's enough of that. Mayor Castle, Gary Buxton, General Manager. Just briefly updating the From Spaces to People Places initiative. It's our effort to sort of address Council's strategic plan initiative to increase year-round utilisation of parks and public spaces. That's its ultimate intent. The goals are to understand how current spaces are utilised and how residents experience those places. Information we do not have. That should lead to a range of ideas, we hope. In the short and medium term, we have quick wins that we can possibly integrate into the 2020 budget. And then to create a set of design guidelines for public spaces. And we do that essentially in two phases. The first is, this year, would be the user experience information gathering through a survey instrument that we think we can likely do in-house. There are lots of examples out there that we can create, as I've already done. And hopefully get that sort of rough together, share that with the committee, and then push it out to use. The second phase is, we're suggesting, is going to be in 2020. There's a budget implication with that to get some consulting expertise to round up similar communities and their public design guidelines, combine that with the user experience information that we've got and create a set of guidelines that would guide public space design in a more comprehensive fashion rather than looking at quick wins and short-term improvements. The deliverables would be setting up a public committee, designing the survey instrument, getting that summary at the end of the year, hopefully, of user experience information, although there's no reason that this needs to stay time restricted. We certainly do need to run it on a seasonal basis to get user experience over different seasons because different parks, different spaces get used differently, different climates, different weather conditions. So we have a summary by the end of the year. If it continues, that's great. We'll just get more information. That'll lead to a summary of potential changes, best practices, and then phase 2 would be the design guideline document. I don't know that I need to go through it in the detail is there as to the mechanics of how we intend to do this, so I'll take questions of councillors. So interested.
Thank you. The milestone dates that are in the reports, take us back to April. So under phase 1, user experience and information, item 1 is appointment and assemble committee, and that was April to May. Has that already happened, or
No,
yet?
no, these deadlines haven't been updated since I put the document together. They would need to be updated. We're a few months behind, but I think it's still doable.
Councillor Stoner.
So just to push on it a little bit more, one of the project risks and dependencies, which is identified as a high severity, is competing priorities and internal staffing resources. So a reality check in terms of knowing that the timeline is already a few months behind. How do I frame this? Where do those competing priorities sit in terms of accomplishing this on still at December 2020, or should we really just move that out by 6 months?
I don't think I'll know the answer to that question until I've done the first cut at the survey instrument. See, I've already found dozens online, similar. So it may be as simple as sort of selecting, combining, refining. The other risk is whether or not that can then be created in a simple online tool. We want the data inflow to be online and coded as much as possible, so the data collection and review is relatively straightforward. Getting 67 handwritten forms with uncoded information is not going to be very easy to process. But I think that's user experience surveys are easy to find. They're not rocket science to do. I think we can get something out in the next couple of months. So I assume that we can get some form of data back in by the end of the year. We may just want to let that run through the first 6 months of 2020 because it's just new information that we're going to get. So I would suggest let's see what we can do. And if it takes a little longer, so be it. The other thing to note is phase 2 is dependent on Council's budgeting for 2020. This isn't a commitment to do that at this point in time. We'll make that decision in the fall when we do budget review. So I think the short answer is let's have a go and see where we get to and see what information we can gather by the end of the year.
Councillor Anderson.
I appreciate Mr. Buxton's comments that Council is not committed to $50,000 yet in next year's budget. But I have to reflect, we have another ongoing policy initiative that's mentioned in our strategic plan. It's not highlighted because it's not new. It's an ongoing thing, that is the Marine Action Strategy. And as I read the flow of the project here and the work involved, I'm inclined to think that I'm troubled by potentially spending $50,000 on this project and not enough on something like a Marine Action Strategy. And I know I'm a broken record on this, but I feel that we should be looking to hire some professional assistants. And we have multiple puzzles to solve on the waterfront that represent, this is just one set of issues, but we've got multiple. And so I'm bothered by that $50,000, and we'll revisit it again, of course, next budget. But I'm concerned of the relative emphasis we are giving this initiative and that type of budget. It is also the same amount that we decided not to proceed with on the dredging project plan for this year. Presumably we may revisit that next year too. So in summary, my main concern is that's a fairly hefty budget relative to two other very significant projects for the community, the Marine Action Strategy and the dredging plan. That's just an observation.
So, to your point, Councillor Anderson, as we heard this afternoon, the Marine Action Strategy is coming before us for an update shortly, certainly before the summer break. And we are also be doing a budgeting workshop with staff before the summer break as well. So, we'll address your comments at that point.
Thank you, that does alleviate my concerns.
Okay.
Just a scoping question. We've heard, just recently had a presentation on safe routes to school, and we spent some time on our trails. And I think you might argue that a lot of that's active transit, but I think other people might feel that, especially with kids, the route is part of their public places, and so just interested in how much we might be looking at some of these things, and sometimes it's transit between the spaces, but those links can be spaces in and of themselves, arguably. I presume we're sort of saying, no, that's active transit and that's a separate thing, but I'm just curious.
Actually, no. One of the streets are public spaces, so if somebody wanted to take the survey and use it to look at Cleveland, look at the 2nd Avenue, look at the Corridor Trail from, say, Brennan Park to the Adventure Centre, it could conceivably do that as well. The only thing that I don't really want to get into doing buildings, that sort of user experience surveys for buildings and user experience surveys for outdoor spaces tend to be two different things. So I'd rather leave the facility development to facility redevelopment and look at outdoor public spaces for this go around. But yeah, I think it offers the potential to do that.
One of the questions I had is the potential overlap between the committee and the consultant. So striking this committee, they'll help figure out what the data collection tool looks like, the kinds of questions, the places we want people to give us feedback on. And as a community advisory committee, help us interpret that data and identify some of the quick wins. But then there is, I think, some benefit in having some overlap with that consultant as they come on for phase 2, so that they can hear that community feedback from the community as well. So even if we extend, so I was wondering, does the committee extend into phase 2, or does it end with the data collection?
I don't, albeit unclearly, I'd anticipate it running through the completion of the project, so they would sort of be first point of review for the incoming stuff from the consultant.
Okay.
I'm also hoping that the committee could A, administer the survey instrument themselves, and B, drive use of that survey instrument through the community. So sort of advocates and marketing, so to speak. So,
and I think you addressed that in your risks. Is that the appointments and the invitations to join this committee would be really important in terms of how we engage with community partners, and having that representation from 8 to 80 would be wonderful. But we're going to have to be pretty creative and thoughtful about how we achieve that. So I'm excited by that notion, and that'll be something we haven't done before. And I also think your next risk about inadequate public feedback through the survey instrument is to have the committee pilot it first, so that if it's a bit clunky or things aren't working, we've only tested it with a small group of people before we put it out to the broader. I think that's a risk mitigation strategy as well. But overall, I'm excited by this plan and engaging with our community in this way. Any other comments or questions from council? All right. Anybody want to move receipt? Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Rupert. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries.
thank you.
I hope you single-handedly are successful when you're Okay, we have our consent agenda. We have minutes on here and some correspondence as well. Anybody want to pull anything? Councillor Anderson.
Committee of the whole minutes for May 21st.
Councillor Pettingill.
Letter 4, C4. And I think C2, unless someone else is going to fill that one. Just want to make sure someone does.
Okay. All right. So pulled committee of the whole minutes for May 21st, C2, C4. Someone want to move the consent agenda? Moved by Councillor Anderson, second by Councillor French. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Anderson, committee of the whole minutes for May 21st.
Yes, the minutes for May 21st include the report on our discussion of the Sea to Sky multimodal evacuation plan. And while I won't press that this would be included or changed to the minutes, we did touch on the fact that the plan had already been endorsed by the Reserve Municipality of Worcester. So I wonder if I could take the opportunity to ask about that circumstance, that really we were kind of rubber stamping it, if you like, that it wasn't presented in a draft form. Was there some particular reason why this report was not presented as a draft, and to, for example, to Worcester also as a draft earlier? Is there a time constraint, or is there some background to that?
Robin, do you have an answer to that?
No, but the question was asked at the committee of the whole on the 21st, and Megan did respond to it. But I don't know the answer why it wasn't presented as a draft to either council. I thought it was.
I was in conversation with a citizen in Pemberton the other day who was following the evacuation plan, and they were represented on the steering committee, and they were quite surprised that Harrison Lake was not referred to as an evacuation route, only the road, not by water. And that was an issue I touched on as well, is there could have been some more attention to marine issues. And Megan replied at one point that it's possible we could come back and do some more investigations and report to council on some of the gaps. And it's natural that there will be. We're going to make changes to our infrastructure, and eventually these will find their way into the evacuation plan. But it's in that context that there may have been other things others may have pointed out, but we were given essentially a completed plan.
And Mayor Elliott, I do remember that when she was asked a similar question to that, Megan did respond that each of the communities that were represented in the plan, their evacuation modeling was done based on the risk, the hazard risk that was identified as the top sort of 3 for the community. Ours being flooding, and the recommendations that came out as a result for the Squamish area didn't include much of the northern route as a result of that, or going up and around to Harrison.
I think it's important to also remember that this planning exercise was endorsed by previous councils, and really wanted to make sure that we didn't enter another fire season without a plan in place. So there was a time is of the essence sort of piece that moved this project along. But like with any plan, it is never finished. We will always be able to make it better. And so I think Ms. Latimer heard the feedback from our council. Whistler provided similar feedback, but we did want a plan in place for this fire season. And so, I know she took all of our comments away from that meeting. But I don't want us to think of this plan as final, but it is a first step. And then, of course, we haven't even addressed everything that happens once you get everyone out of the community, how you take care of them and then get them back. So there's a whole piece of this puzzle that we haven't addressed yet.
Very good. I was also similarly satisfied that Ms. Latimer and her team were quite conscientiously taking notes during our session. Just wanted to ask if there was an overall reason for that draft endorsement situation. Thank you.
And then we were supposed to present on the same day, and we had some agenda juggling that we had to do, which put us a week later. So I apologize for that. Okay, then, so do you want me to approve those minutes now?
Yes.
Okay, so motion to approve committee of the whole minutes for May 21st. Moved by Councilor Ray, second by Councilor Stoner. All those in favor, opposed, motion carries. Councilor Pettengill, you pulled 2 letters.
Yeah, I guess firstly want to thank the students for the letters of concern. It's something that keeps me up at night, and I hope we can run our tights and capes and do what needs to be done. And on that note, I'm wondering what are our next steps with regards to these requests?
Do you have an idea?
I've got a whole host, but hear other people.
I'm not seeing any hands, Councilor Pettengill, so if you want to.
Well, would this be an opportunity to have a working group, or to have follow-up discussion with the students, or how, I think a climate emergency resolution might make sense, and there's maybe other pieces along with that, some other things we might want to include in such a resolution. So I'm not sure what the best way to draft that would be.
I know that what didn't make it onto our agenda was the climate demands from the student strike on the 24th. Did they not email that to all of council?
I think you forwarded it to us.
So we have received very specific demands from the high school students who organized the Fridays for the Future Strike for the Climate on May 24th, which would go along with these letters. And I certainly think that as a political body that has had demands put forward, that we should respond not only to these students that have written to us, but also to the students who organized the climate strike. So further to your idea, Councilor Pettengill, I'd like to move that the mayor provide an official response to the climate strike demands and bring it back to council for review. Second by Councilor Race. Any discussion? Councilor Race?
Well, thank you, and because I was, excuse me, wondering where that letter got to, because I remember reading that, and there were some specific municipal demands, and also some demands for other levels of government, and certainly the municipal ones, I think were generally within our control, and so it's certainly worth a discussion.
And then it would also help us respond to these letters from Don Ross in a similar vein. Any other thoughts? Councilor Bird?
I'd just like to add that reading those letters really drove home the importance of taking action and responsibility of the office, and it was heartening to see that. So I look forward to seeing what we're responsible.
All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Any- I'm sorry. Did you want to add to the conversation?
I was just going to say that wasn't received, that letter that you're referring to, until May 31st, which was after this agenda had gone out.
Right.
So it's been assigned, it has been assigned, it's not lost, it's been assigned to the next agenda.
So since it's been assigned to the next agenda,
Yep.
and now I have the ability to develop a response, we can bring them both forward at the same
That's,
time.
yeah.
Yes, that's efficient. That's great. Councilor Pettengill, does that address everything you need on item 2?
Yes.
Okay, item 4.
So I just wanted to, we had a lot of great feedback last week, and some more feedback around speed. And one of the comments that has come out a few times is the question about can we do 30 all the time around schools and or around residential neighborhoods and or expand school zones and speech on safe routes to school. So I just wanted, and forgive me if it was discussed last week, but where will that discussion continue? What those sorts of things?
So one, we did ask staff to bring back an update before the summer break on any short-term things we could address from the feedback we heard last week within our current operational budget. And then I think we have to consider the direction from that meeting forward. If there's any other bigger policy items we might want to put forward for 2020, which we would then have to budget. So something like changing the speed limit, residential, like the residential speed limit or expanding the zones, I think would require some community engagement and some time. So that would be something we would have to budget for in the coming years. Does that help address?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't getting sort of lost that we would have a discussion about those topics at some point.
It's on the agenda. It's on the agenda. Okay. Motion to receive those letters. Moved by Councilor Ray, seconded by Councilor Stoner. All those in favor? All those motion carries. There we go. Action requested. So this is a letter of support request from, and the last name is Gray, not Brave. I'm going to recuse myself from this conversation. So my husband is on the board of the school in which this organization rents space from. So there may be a perceived perception of bias. So I will hand over the chair to Councillor Bylaw.
Council, are there any thoughts about this? Councilor Racing?
Generally supportive. My only concern was that we are restricted from providing support to a for-profit business, which might be associated with this. So I'm supportive of sending a letter outlining needs for daycare generally in our community and so forth in those terms, as opposed to this business deserves support, particular to a business. So I move that the mayor write a letter of general support outlining the needs for daycare in our community, not specific to any business, any particular business.
Yes.
Could I ask for an amendment? The mayor's in conflict, so it would maybe be the acting mayor.
Councilor, thank you, Councilor French. Any discussion on the motion? Councilor Herbert?
I'm supportive of the motion as outlined. I agree with Councilor Race that we shouldn't be supporting any one particular business, but there's a great need in our community, and I would expect that we'd be able to write that council would be writing a similar letter in similar circumstances. It's already known we need to approach this as having a canned response when people come forward like, yes, we need child care response, what we can do to help facilitate what we have is a letter of support in general. But for this one, yeah, this is great. Let's get some more child care response.
Councilor French?
Yeah, there is significant need for daycare space in our community. I've heard from many of my neighbors who have young families that are very worried about the lack of daycare spaces. So I absolutely support this.
Anyone else? Call the question. All those in favor? And motion passes unanimously.
Okay, coming to the end. Recommendation from May 21st, Committee of the Whole, that the District of Squamish endorses the Sea Sky multimodal evacuation plan. Moved by Councilor Ray, seconded by Councilor French. Any comments? All those in favor, opposed, motion carries. Thank you. We don't need to do business around for a minute, but we already did that.
Any of the other.
Any of the other minutes? Seeing none. We have minutes from the ADP to receive for May 16th. Move receipt by Councillor Stoner, second by Councillor French. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We have one in-camera announcement, which is to appoint Sydney Lyons to the Public Art Committee as a member at large until June 2020. And any unscheduled public attendance?
Is this where I come in right now?
Well, you kind of had to make your case at the beginning of the meeting, but you can leave with council.
I'm sorry, I didn't know the proceedings.
I move that we hear from John.
Second. Councilor Oker. All right, you got 5 minutes.
Okay.
Just come forward and state your name for the record, and you don't represent yourself or anybody else. And this is why this can't wait until 2 weeks from today.
I was told actually today was the day that I was supposed to come speak. I'm surprised there's no one here. I'm doing the best that I can here.
All right, so your name and...
My name is Gord Conkin. I know Armand. I moved here in 2001, and I came from Winnipeg. There is a lot of people that I know in this town that have done the same thing. And we came for the climbing, the mountain biking, windsurfing, paragliding, it doesn't matter what it is. And I'm just going back to this camping bylaw. I feel like it's really important that the council recognizes, climbers have, and I'm saying climbers because that's the group that I associate with. We have a really hard time of organizing ourselves. It's just not, we don't make committees, we go climbing. And it's really a difficult thing, so I think people have had a tough time getting the message across. And I don't think council realizes how many people in this town have camped here for a weekend and or come up here for a summer, come from all parts of the country, come from Europe. I have 3 friends coming this summer from different parts of Europe that are gonna buy a van here. They're gonna come climb in Squamish for 2 months and then they're gonna go down to Yosemite. It's like a tour. And there is a lot that happens in this economy here in this town. And I think Armin can attest to that, being in the mountain biking world. I mean, I go mountain biking all the time to the university. There's people camped up there all the time. They're going and buying tubes and tires and so forth for their bikes, if not a bike, from Armin's shop and or other bike shops here in town, whether it be Tantalus or whatnot. And I've owned a construction company. I've employed at some point 7 people in this town. Not all of them were climbers. We own tea shops and just so many different small businesses here in town. The problem is climbers and mountain bikers and outdoor enthusiasts just don't organize themselves very well. So I guess what I'm asking from council to think about when you guys are coming up with a camping bylaw is it's not just people that are, it's a lifestyle choice. My wife and I went to Europe last year, not because we're poor. We have a house in Paradise Valley. We rented out our house, but we went to Europe and we lived in a van for 6 months because rather than going for a trip for 1 month in which we pay for hotels and food and whatnot, we went for 6 months for the same amount of time, or for the same cost, and lived in a van and traveled around Spain and France and whatever. And I know I'm dragging on here, but I just want to be very clear.
You have your 5 minutes, so you're not dragging on.
Yeah, I just want to be very clear that it's a lifestyle choice and it's not always socioeconomic. You know, we're not throwing our garbage in the bush. I can't so many climbers and so many mountain bikers and so many windsurfers are stewards for the environment, and there is a percentage that isn't, but that's just not, I mean, the reality is, and I think if you think of it logically, most of us aren't. We're outdoor enthusiasts. And I guess I'm just trying to hammer that point across as best that I can, that I really want you guys to think long and hard about how you're going to word this bylaw. Because I don't live in a van anymore. I have a van. We still go on road trips to Oregon to climb the Smith Rock or whatever. But the reality is, you're never going to get rid of like van people in general. It's just like it's a lifestyle choice. And they're going to go out to Squamish Valley. They're going to go out to the end of Paradise Valley to the Starvation Lake Park. There's 20 people there every day now. And those campfires that you guys are worried about are still going to come here if they start there or if they start somewhere deep in Squamish Valley. Yeah, so they're just, I guess, I just really want you guys to think about it, come up with a very good plan. And that involves, if you guys can make a profit or it can pay for itself somehow where you guys take a parcel of land and find a way to, you know, supply facilities and water, which I think are the two things. And I think Bishop, California is a great example. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of it, but they've done an amazing job in that town. There's something called the Pit. It is a camping site where climbers come literally from all over the world. It's one of the most famous rock climbing areas in the world. And people all camp in one spot. And at one point, the local churches used to supply a bathroom, and they would bring water and they would bring donuts and try to convert people. But now it has become, the town council has come there and has supplied bathrooms and water, and people come from all over, so they don't have people defecating, you know, in a desert all over the, you know, all over Hills Half Acre. I'm sure that's not the right word, but I'm just doing my best here. So I wrote all this and I was just like, I'm gonna speak from the heart here. So I think that's all I have to say, but I really, there was a lot of people talking about this in this town, and as you can see, there's nobody here supporting it. And I personally don't want to be that person. I also, Tomo, who was here last time, she's awesome, and you did a great job of getting her to get her point across. And I love Tomo. She's a passionate person. But again, it's hard to find that person who's going to represent a group that is so anti-disestablishment in a way, if that makes sense. And so I just hope you guys really think about it and really think further than the Mamquam Forest Road, that people are going to go out to Squamish Valley, they're going to go to mile 15, and if you get woken up in the middle of the night, and it's happened to me before in Yosemite National Park, it's happened to me in Washington, it is super distressing. It is like you're exhausted and somebody's telling you have to leave. And you're like, I'm just sleeping. And I don't think more bylaw enforcement agents is the path forward. I think it's trying to find a way to get people into one location. So, anyway,
Appreciate
that's
your
all I have to
comments
say.
tonight. And thanks for coming. I know it's not easy to stand up and.
Yeah, it
thank
isn't.
you.
It's not my thing. So.
Yeah, I get it. And we had a lot of very passionate community members come out and talk to this issue. And it's one of the reasons that we only gave the bylaw first reading. And by no means are we appointing more bylaw officers. We don't have the budget for that. We are trying to give them an enforcement tool to manage some of the density issues. But I don't think anyone's intent was to run vans out of town. But we are struggling with the fact of the matter is that we have campgrounds that are empty during the week and people are choosing not to use them. So I think there's a conversation about trying to understand why people won't pay for the services that when they're coming in this density of numbers, we actually need them to start using places where there are facilities for garbage and toilets and that sort of thing. So our staff have been directed to go out and engage a bit more before the second reading comes back to make sure that the wording on the bylaw is where we need it to be. And then there's a second conversation, which is, you know, there are businesses who talk about some of their employees living in vans. So what is our plan with Tourism Squamish and the Chamber around workforce housing and that conversation? And should there be a permanent campground for year-round or partial year-round van dwellers? And where would that be and how do we pay for those services? So I think there's a commitment from this council to explore the longer conversation. And in the short term, we need an enforcement tool to help us with that small minority of people that just can't seem to get this right. And we need the ability to move them on. So we definitely hear you, Mr. Conkin, and that's why we took a step-by-step approach rather than giving it first 2 readings. We do want to try and get it right. So hopefully you'll follow this issue as it comes up through council again, and certainly we'll be welcoming people's feedback as we move it forward. So thanks for coming.
Yeah, can I just add one more thing too?
Only if you do it at the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have a loud voice, so people generally.
Yeah, it's all recorded and on camera, so that's why we need
So just one last thing, and I'll be really quick here because I know you guys everyone wants to get home. But another thing that I thought about, and I had this all written down, but it's not really me. But I really think there's different types of campers, and I hope Squamish Council understands that. There are people coming from Chilliwack and Abbotsford, and they're dirt biking and ATVing. And then there's also, you know, the really good van dwellers that are definitely like leave no trace. And then there's the people in between. So there is a big, okay, good, thank you.
Thank you very much for coming and sitting through our meeting. It's nice to have an audience. It's just,
I told my wife how awkward this was.
any open question period? Clarification?
I'm good.
Our media is good? You're good? Any council staff announcements? Councilor Bird. I'm just going to go around the circle this way.
Thank you. Since the last meeting, I went on a ride along there with their city and spent a night with them. I think their shift is from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. I did the 7 to about 4 a.m. pull, and it was very enlightening. The work that the RCMP does in our community is I thought I knew what they were up to and what to expect for the night, and I was blown away by the professionalism and the compassion of the officers that I was with, and it was very it was a very enlightening evening, and just like to commend the work they do, and it was an honor to be out there to see how they serve our community.
Councilor Anderson?
This Friday afternoon, 1:30 p.m., Squamish Streamkeepers is holding a public meeting at the Granville Island Hotel in Vancouver. The reason for that is to publicize work being done and success story of the False Creek Herring Recovery Project, which has evolved from our local Squamish project. One of the reasons this meeting is being held is to try to recruit city volunteers, because at the present time it's mostly people from Squamish that are going down there and doing all the work behind this success story in False Creek. The outcome will be great public relations for Squamish for a very interesting, successful Squamish ecological restoration project, and we're taking the lessons and experience from it and exporting them, and it'll be a feather in our Squamish caps. So that's happening this Friday, and it's open to all, and we're hoping to have the Vancouver Museum, which is nearby, and representatives of the Squamish Nation, whose ancient village is right on top of us, down there at False Creek, also in attendance.
On Saturday, June 8th, it is the Reuse It Fair at Glennon Park. It will be happening from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And I encourage everybody to bring working order, small, large appliances, well-maintained toys, clothing, as well as furniture. If you want, you can drop it off in the morning. And then if you want to go pick through it all and find your treasures and bring them home for free in the afternoon, you get to do that too.
Thank you. Dr. French?
On Wednesday, May 29th, I had the privilege of attending one of the World Cafe events. It was held at the Youth Center, and Councillor Pettingill was in attendance with me. I was impressed by the level of engagement that the young people brought to the event. There was some great discussion, some well-articulated thoughts, and I thought it was a complete success.
So we touched on it earlier, but I had the fortune to attend the climate strike that the students held on Friday,
Friday, May 24th.
May 24th. Really appreciate the reminder and the push that we're here to do a job, and we have some heavy responsibility on our shoulders, and I'm eager to get cracking on that, and I can't thank the students enough for taking the time to ask us to do what we I think need to be doing. Also, last Monday, I think it was the BCCIC or BCCC, or there's a whole bunch of C's and an I in there. Councillor Anderson was there as well. It was a presentation at the Common about the Sustainable Development Goals. And I've previously, prior to the election, seen a presentation on this. It was a really good reminder in the context of some of the climate issues we're facing. Basically, the G77, I believe, which is the poorer nations, second and third world countries largely, that don't typically have a strong voice, but they were able to essentially demand from the rest of the world a set of goals that everyone eventually agreed to. And one of the points is that it's critical we deal with climate change, but it's not sufficient. And unless we deal with gender equity, poverty, and a whole host, I think there's 17 goals in total, we have to be taking all 17 of these things seriously. For me, I would like to look through some of our strategic plan and some of our district activities through that lens. I think we're doing a lot of this stuff anyways, but I think it's a very useful framework because, apparently in Italy, they name the 17 goals at the start of every soccer game, and so it's a common language that everyone's speaking and a common set of goals to quite literally save the world. And so I found it to be a very powerful and a useful presentation. And I think it'd be worthwhile people taking a bit of time to look into the sustainable development goals.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott. This Friday, the district has the privilege of an opportunity to host an international delegation that's coming, and it's in connection with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. The link is through the Jordan Municipal Support Project that I had the opportunity to participate in March. So one of the women that I worked with who's from Jordan, and a councillor and a mayor from Cambodia, they're all attending the Women Deliver conference down in the city, or in Vancouver right now, and the three of them with their interpreter and driver are attending Squamish on Friday. And we have a group of key staff, Mayor Elliott and ideally Councillor Stoner, if she's available, are going to join us, and we'll speak in the morning. They want to learn about local government in Canada, particularly Squamish, and then specifically gender equity in our local government world and here in Canada, and share stories and learnings. And then in the afternoon it will flip, and Ms. Lama Sadawi from Jordan will be presenting on the Jordan Municipal Support Project and Federation of Canadian Municipalities projects that are international, and how Canadian municipalities can continue to support internationally in terms of growing municipal capacity. So we're really looking forward to it, and I'll report back after Friday.
Thank you. So May 23rd, I had the pleasure of cutting the very biodegradable ribbon at Public Works Day. Our staff did an incredible job. There were 350 students there. It was awesome. Lots of good energy, and our Public Works staff and all the staff that helped support them by taking the kids through all the different stations. They worked so hard to make this really interesting and entertaining for the kids. And thanks to Kiki for the barbecue that happened that day. The following day, May 24th, was Mayor for a Day, so I spent the morning with Willow Paul and Hudson Van Dyke. Willow was the acting mayor, Hudson was the deputy mayor, and wow, that was a fun morning, spending time with them and their friends who came along. We all got to ride in a fire truck for the first time, so that was a highlight for all of us, not just the kids. Yeah, it's one of the pleasures of this job is seeing our community through the eyes of young people and the things they care about. So Hudson, idea was to have a farm where if you donated your time, you got to take food home with you. And Willow had spent time going all through the district, taking pictures of things that we're responsible for, and then wanted to know more from me about how the city operates and who works for us and what are the things that we do. Did she get all our pictures? It was a very cool morning, and then I got to quickly turn around and join students at the climate strike, and had a great time on the march with them. And quite frankly, they could do that every Friday if they wanted. I would be there. Then on the 31st, I did my ride along with the RCMP, very eye-opening. They are very calm and professional and cool, and it was just a really great experience to see Squamish through the role that they play. And it was very scary racing down the highway with our lights and sirens on. I'm glad Alex was in charge of the car. I felt very safe with him, but boy, I don't ever need to travel that fast very often. Coming up this 7th, I'm kicking off World Ocean Day at Mancomb Elementary School with the students there. I'll be joined by Acting Mayor Pettingill because then I have to leave to join the Jordan Project. And then on the 14th, the Squamish Nation is helping the District of Squamish and the RCMP wake up our canoe in preparation for National Indigenous Peoples Day. And the canoe race is on the 21st, which we will work very hard and still lose. So, they are awesome paddlers, but we have a very beautiful canoe that will be in this year, so looking forward to that. Those are my updates. Motion to terminate. Moved by Councilor Herford, second by Councilor French. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks everyone. Thanks for coming.